Have you ever watched someone's entire world collapse in a single moment? Imagine standing on your front porch, the sun still low in the sky, kids barely dressed for school, cereal bowls still warm on the table, when suddenly your life spins out of control, and not because of anything you did. That's exactly what happened to Kendra Allen, a 32-year-old black woman from Shady Oaks, Georgia. A quiet mother of two who never imagined her name would trend on social media or that her story would spark outrage across the country. But one Tuesday morning, as she kissed her youngest child goodbye and stepped onto her porch to throw out the trash, she found herself face to face with 3 police officers, guns drawn, shouting her name. And within seconds her kids, aged 6 and 9, were watching their mother being slammed against a squad car, handcuffed and shoved inside, while the neighborhood dogs barked and a neighbor filmed the entire scene on a shaking phone camera. That video would go viral. That arrest would lead to a courtroom apology heard around the country. And the truth, when it finally came out, would shake the very foundation of Kendra's small community. But let's go back. Let's walk through it, moment by moment, because to understand the full weight of what happened, you need to see how one morning, one mistake and one misidentified photo nearly destroyed an innocent woman's life, and why that apology from a judge wasn't nearly enough. Kendra Allen wasn't perfect, but she was focused. A nursing assistant at St. Mary's Rehabilitation Center, she worked night shifts and spent her days juggling motherhood, bills, and a relentless sense of duty. Her apartment was small but clean. Her kids, Maya and Jalen, were her world. She'd grown up in this very town where everybody claimed to know everybody, but she also knew how quickly familiar turned into suspicious, when your skin was the wrong shade and your name didn't sound neutral enough. Still, she kept to herself mostly. No criminal record. No trouble with the law. Until that Tuesday morning. It started with a knock at the door, sharp, urgent, impatient. Kendra, half-dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt, rushed to answer it, thinking maybe someone needed help or that the landlord was at it again about the loose gutter. But when she opened it, there wasn't a familiar face on the other side. There were 2 officers, one white, one Latino, standing with their hands near their holsters. Behind them, a 3rd officer, female, black, eyes unreadable. "Are you Kendra Allen?" the first one barked. Before she could even nod, they grabbed her arms, twisted them behind her back, and yanked her forward. "You're under arrest for identity fraud, larceny, and possession of counterfeit documents." Kendra's mouth dropped open. "What? What are you talking about? I don't even..." She didn't get to finish. Maya screamed. Jalen began crying. And Kendra, confused, humiliated, and furious, was dragged in front of her own children like a criminal on display. What followed was a blur, the blinding red and blue lights bouncing off neighbors' windows, the distant voice of someone asking, "What's she done?" and the cold steel of handcuffs tightening against her wrists. She tried to reason. She tried to plead. "Please, my kids are home alone." But no one listened. It wasn't until they were halfway down the road that the black female officer, her name later identified as Officer Janine Watts, finally turned back and said quietly, "Child Protective Services is on their way." That was it. No empathy. No explanation. Just procedure. At the station, Kendra was photographed, fingerprinted, and forced to strip for a full-body search. They treated her like she was part of some elaborate criminal ring, interrogated her for hours, grilled her about fake checks and stolen IDs, showing her grainy ATM photos of a woman who looked vaguely similar but wasn't her. "That's not me," Kendra said again and again. "I don't know anything about this. I've never even been to that part of town." But the Detective Holcomb, leaned in close and sneered, "You expect me to believe there are 2 women in Shady Oaks who look like this? Come on, Kendra. Just confess and save us all the time." She didn't confess. She refused to. Because she knew the truth. Meanwhile, Maya and Jalen were taken to a foster center 30 minutes away. Maya refused to speak to the social worker. Jalen threw up from stress. Neither of them had ever been away from their mom overnight. And now no one would tell them when, or if, they'd see her again. Kendra's sister Lila wasn't called until 6 p.m. that night, after hours of red tape and missed messages. She drove in from 2 towns over, furious and terrified. But by the time she reached the foster center, the kids were asleep, curled together on a cot, Maya still holding the picture frame she'd taken from their living room before the officers arrived. Back in holding, Kendra sat in silence, staring at the wall, trying to remember what she could have possibly done to land in this nightmare. Her job didn't pay well, but she wasn't stealing. Her friends weren't criminals. She didn't have enemies. She was invisible, if anything. And maybe that was part of the problem, because when you're invisible to the people in power, they can paint you as anything they want. And that's exactly what happened. The woman in the ATM photo had used a fake ID to withdraw nearly $10,000 from 3 separate banks. The name on the ID? Kendra Allen. The address? Hers. The photo? Blurry, but close enough to fool someone who didn't care to look closer. And that, apparently, was all it took. No one ran a proper facial comparison. No one checked timestamps. No one asked if Kendra had an alibi, which she did. She was on the hospital clock, signed in and badge verified at the very time one of the withdrawals happened. But the arrest warrant had been rushed through based on a single tip from a clerk at a pawn shop who said, "She looked like the girl in the news last year, the one with the braids." Kendra hadn't worn braids in over 8 months. But that didn't matter. It was enough to ruin everything. By Thursday she had a court-appointed lawyer, Barry Daniels. Middle-aged. White. A little too casual. "We'll sort this out," he said, "don't worry." But when the first hearing came around, the DA pushed for detention without bail, citing the serious nature of the fraud and a flight risk based on her access to false identities. Kendra gasped. Her lawyer muttered something about procedural review, but the judge nodded and ordered her held. Just like that. No bail. No return to her kids. No explanation. But something shifted that weekend. The video of her arrest had made its way online. The neighbor, a teenager named Shauna who lived across the street, posted it with a caption that read, "They arrested Miss K like she was a drug lord." Her kids were screaming the whole time. "This is messed up." The video was grainy but powerful. You could see Kendra screaming, "Please, I didn't do anything." You could hear Maya crying, "Mommy?" And you could see Officer Watts looking directly at the camera, then quickly turning away. Within hours, the video had thousands of shares. Then tens of thousands. The hashtags #JusticeForKendra and #WrongWoman began trending. Civil rights groups started reaching out. A former public defender turned TikTok advocate named Trey Franklin posted a breakdown of the arrest, pointing out inconsistencies in the timeline and calling out the Shady Oaks Police Department for what he called sloppy, biased police work wrapped in procedural arrogance. Suddenly, Kendra's story wasn't just local anymore, it was national. By Monday, the police chief released a statement defending the arrest, saying it was based on credible evidence and eyewitness accounts. But the pressure kept mounting. Journalists started digging. Kendra's time-stamped work badge photo from St. Mary's was published. It showed her smiling at the front desk at 11:03 a.m., the same minute the ATM footage showed someone making a withdrawal from a different part of town. The stories didn't match. And slowly public opinion turned. Then came the judge. Judge Meredith Clark. Known for being tough but fair. She reviewed the motion to dismiss filed by Barry Daniels, who, to his credit, had finally gotten around to presenting the alibi evidence and filing a formal complaint about the mistaken identity. Judge Clark ordered a special hearing, open to the public. On a rainy Wednesday morning, Kendra was brought into court, this time in regular clothes, hair pulled back, no shackles. The courtroom was packed. News crews lined the back. Her kids sat in the front row next to Aunt Lila, holding signs that said, "Bring Mommy home." When the judge entered, the room went silent. She flipped through the file, looked out at the DA, then at the officers seated in the back row, then at Kendra. And then she said something no one expected. "This woman," she began, "has no business being here. This arrest was based on incomplete evidence, questionable identification, and, frankly, negligence." She turned to Kendra. "On behalf of this court, Ms. Allen, I apologize." Gasps echoed through the room. The DA fidgeted. Officer Watts lowered her eyes. And Kendra started to cry. For the first time since the arrest, she let herself break. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. Because as the courtroom emptied and Kendra hugged her kids for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, a reporter stopped her outside the courthouse and asked, "How does it feel to be free?" And Kendra, her voice still trembling, said something that would go viral all over again. "I'm not free. Not really. Not until someone pays for what they did." And someone would. Because what happened next, what Kendra uncovered about the real woman behind the fraud, what the police tried to hide, and what Officer Watts finally admitted, would turn this story from a tragedy into a reckoning. And you're not going to believe who was behind it all. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The camera flashes were blinding, but Kendra Allen stood still. Her arms wrapped around her children, her eyes focused, her expression unreadable. The apology from Judge Clark had made national headlines. Some praised it, others scoffed at how rare it was to hear an apology from the bench. But for Kendra, it wasn't enough. An apology doesn't undo trauma. It doesn't remove the memory of your children watching you get handcuffed like a threat. It doesn't clear your name in the minds of neighbors who still whisper. It doesn't fix Maya's sudden fear of sirens or Jalen's quiet sobbing at night. What Kendra wanted now wasn't just freedom. It was justice. And justice meant accountability. It meant someone had to answer for what happened. So as reporters yelled questions and camera lenses chased her down the courthouse steps, Kendra walked silently, clutching her kids tighter, already thinking about the next step. That step would begin just days later when she and her sister Lila sat down at the kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork and laptops, determined to piece together what the police had never bothered to find: the truth about the woman who had stolen her identity, and why the system had been so quick to believe she was guilty. They didn't have access to police databases or facial recognition tools, but they had time, motive, and something the police lacked: genuine curiosity. The case report had listed 3 ATM withdrawals tied to the fraud, all in different parts of town, and all supposedly captured on camera. One of those videos, recently leaked online by a whistleblower inside the Shady Oaks precinct, showed a woman, Black, early 30s, slim build, with braids and large hoop earrings. She bore a resemblance to Kendra, yes. But she also had a small heart tattoo on her wrist, something Kendra didn't have. That detail had never been mentioned in any police report. It had been conveniently overlooked. What? That same night, Lila remembered something. "Didn't someone you used to work with have a tattoo like that?" she asked, snapping her fingers. Kendra blinked. And then it clicked. A name she hadn't thought of in over a year: Tasha Green. A former coworker at St. Mary's who'd been fired after being caught stealing patient meds. Someone who'd once borrowed Kendra's ID badge to clock in late. Someone who knew her address, her birthday, her social security number. Kendra's heart dropped. Could it be her? They scrolled through old Facebook photos and found one. Tasha at a birthday party, smiling, raising a cup to the camera, her wrist clearly showing the same small heart tattoo. The resemblance was uncanny. The braids, the earrings, the attitude. Kendra hadn't spoken to her since the day she was escorted out of the hospital. But it didn't take long to find out that Tasha had resurfaced, under a new Facebook name with new friends living in a different part of Georgia. One bold DM from Lila's burner account confirmed it all. "You ever miss working at St. Mary's?" Lila typed. Tasha replied with a laughing emoji and wrote, "Nah, I'm good. I found better ways to make money." It was vague, but it was enough. Enough to make Kendra's stomach churn. The next day they brought everything they'd compiled, screenshots, timestamps, social media posts, to Barry Daniels, her court-appointed attorney. He skimmed the packet, nodding. "This is good. Real good." But then he leaned back in his chair and added, "Don't get your hopes up about charges being filed. Prosecutors don't like to admit they messed up." Kendra clenched her jaw. "I don't care if they don't like it. They're going to hear it." She didn't wait. She called every journalist who had covered her story. Sent them the photos the tattoo matched, the video stills. Within 48 hours the internet was ablaze again. Hashtag Tasha did it began trending. Public opinion shifted from sympathy to fury. People wanted accountability. They wanted to know how the Shady Oaks Police Department had missed something so obvious. Why no one had verified the alibi before slapping on handcuffs in front of 2 screaming kids. And why Officer Janine Watts, who clearly hesitated during the arrest, hadn't said a word since. That silence broke 1 week later. Officer Watts, now on administrative leave, reached out through an attorney. She agreed to an exclusive interview with a local reporter, one that aired on live TV and sent shockwaves through the entire department. In a trembling voice, she admitted she had doubts from the beginning. "Something didn't feel right," she said. "I asked if we could double-check the ID, run a second facial scan. I was told, we don't have time for that." She fits the profile. Who said it? Detective Holcomb. The same man who had grilled Kendra in interrogation. The same man who had pushed the DA to deny bail. Watts revealed that Holcomb had received the ATM footage days before the arrest but had edited the clip before submitting it to evidence, cropping out the moment when the heart tattoo came into view. The same tattoo Kendra didn't have. "I thought if I said something I'd lose my job," Watts said. "But now I see I should have spoken up." The community erupted. Petitions to fire Holcomb gained thousands of signatures. Protesters showed up at the Shady Oaks precinct demanding answers. But Holcomb refused to comment. Until the subpoena. With growing pressure and evidence piling up, Kendra's legal team filed a civil suit, not just against the Shady Oaks Police Department, but also against Detective Holcomb, naming him personally in the complaint. They claimed false arrest, emotional distress, defamation, and negligence. A new lawyer stepped in to help, a civil rights attorney from Atlanta named Carla Bright, sharp, relentless, and utterly unafraid of making noise. "We're not here for apologies," she said at a press conference. "We're here for accountability. We're here for justice that actually means something." And then during discovery the case blew wide open. Internal emails surfaced. Emails that showed Holcomb had received multiple warnings from other officers to double-check the ID used in the withdrawals. One email even said, "Looks like Tasha Green to me. Didn't she get fired from St. Mary's last year?" Holcomb's reply? "We don't need to open that can of worms. Allen is a cleaner target." Cleaner target. Those words lit a fire in Kendra's chest that burned hotter than anything she'd felt during the arrest. She wasn't just a victim of laziness. She was a victim of a calculated decision, a deliberate effort to pin a crime on someone easy, someone quiet, someone without power. The outrage became national once again. Civil rights leaders held marches. News anchors quoted the emails on live broadcasts. Talk shows debated systemic racism and the weaponization of vague resemblance. And through it all, Kendra stood firm. She began speaking publicly, at schools, panels, churches, telling her story, warning others, and reminding them that mistaken identity is often code for, "we didn't bother looking deeper." But even as the civil case moved forward and Holcomb faced internal review, there was one piece missing. Tasha. She hadn't posted in days. Her account was quiet. Friends said she had moved to Florida, but offered no details. Kendra needed her found. She needed her to face consequences. And one late night, as Lila scrolled Reddit forums about identity theft, she found something unexpected. A thread discussing a recent string of ATM frauds in Jacksonville, Florida. Same pattern. Same tactic. One blurry ATM photo posted by an anonymous user showed a woman in a hoodie and braids, head turned, but her wrist was visible. The heart tattoo. Still there. Carla Bright contacted authorities in Florida. Within 3 days, Tasha Green was arrested in a Miami suburb. She had dozens of fake IDs in her possession, including one still bearing Kendra's name. Her fingerprints tied her to the fraudulent withdrawals. And in her duffel bag? Kendra's stolen birth certificate. Game over. The news broke nationwide. Real fraud suspect in Shady Oaks case finally caught in Florida. But while many celebrated, Kendra felt something deeper, something more complex. Relief, yes. Closure, maybe. But also a creeping sense of how easy it had been for her life to be derailed. How fragile innocence was when the system was built to doubt you first and verify later, if ever. Tasha pleaded guilty. Her sentence was still pending. But Kendra's fight wasn't over. The lawsuit continued. And then something strange happened. Just weeks before the civil trial, Officer Watts asked to meet with Kendra privately. It wasn't part of the case. It wasn't formal. Just a conversation. Kendra agreed. They met at a quiet park outside town. Watts arrived out of uniform, nervously clutching a folder. "There's something you need to see," she said, her voice low. Something that wasn't in the emails. She handed Kendra the folder. Inside were printed transcripts, copied from an internal chat system used at the precinct. Conversations between Holcomb and another officer. Kendra flipped through them and her breath caught. One message read, "We need a quick win. Let's pin this on Allen. She's got no priors, no lawyer, no heat. She'll crack easy." Another said, "Better her than one of ours." Kendra looked up. "What does that mean? One of ours?" Watts hesitated. "There's more. Look at the usernames." Kendra scanned the headers. And then she froze. Because one of the usernames wasn't an officer. It was a city council member. Someone with power. Someone who was supposed to be helping the police clean up Shady Oaks, quietly. And just as she began to read the rest, just as her heart began pounding in her chest from the weight of what this meant, the sound of a car engine roared nearby. Watts looked up, panicked. "Get in your car," she whispered. "Now." Kendra grabbed the folder, clutching it like it held her life, and maybe it did. Because what neither of them knew yet was that someone else had been watching them. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The folder in her hands felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the paper inside, but because of the truth it carried. Kendra Allen sat stiff in the driver's seat of her aging Corolla, parked just outside a quiet park on the edge of Shady Oaks, heart hammering, eyes darting toward the rearview mirror as Officer Janine Watts backed away slowly, scanning the street. "Drive," she'd whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Don't go home. Not yet." Kendra didn't wait to ask questions. Something about the sudden tension in Watts' face, the way her hand kept brushing her hip like she still wore a gun, told Kendra everything she needed to know. This was bigger than she'd thought. Much bigger. And now, someone knew she had the folder. That someone had followed them. She didn't go home. She drove to Lila's instead, took the back route, checked every car behind her 3 times. By the time she reached her sister's house, her fingers were trembling so badly she could barely grip the keys. Inside, Lila took one look at her and said, "What the hell happened?" Kendra dropped the folder on the table and said only, "We've been looking at the wrong people." Inside that folder were screenshots, hundreds of them. Messages pulled from a private Shady Oaks police chat thread. Most of them cryptic, many full of abbreviations and officer slang, but one thing stood out immediately. A user labeled CC Hawk, a city council handle, was involved. Deeply. Their messages were directive, confident, and protected. Holcomb and Watts were mentioned, as were phrases like optics control, fast-track clearance, and most chillingly, keep the Allen story tight. If she flips the narrative, the grant is at risk. Kendra blinked. Grant? What grant? Lila scanned the messages twice, her fingers flying across the keyboard to research public funding documents. Then she found it. A recently announced $2.8 million state crime reduction grant, slated to be released to municipalities that showed improved clearance rates for identity fraud, cyber theft, and financial crimes. The top 10 towns would receive bonus funds for department expansion. Shady Oaks had jumped up the list recently, after Kendra's arrest was recorded as a fraud resolution. They needed her to be guilty. They needed someone. Fast. The deeper they looked, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't just about lazy police work. This was about money. Incentives. Appearances. The arrest was never about truth. It was about quotas. Someone on the city council, likely the one behind the CC Hawk handle, had pushed for a showcase arrest, and Holcomb delivered. He chose Kendra because she looked like the suspect, had no record and wouldn't push back. But she did. And now their whole plan was falling apart. The most disturbing part came on page 6 of the folder. A message time-stamped just hours after Kendra's viral court hearing, when Judge Clark issued the apology. Read. Watts is shaky. Allen's got the press. This needs to be buried before the feds come sniffing. And then another from a different user. Let's just say her brakes stop working. Smirking face. Kendra felt her stomach twist. This wasn't just corruption. It was a threat. The next morning, Carla Bright, her attorney, arranged an emergency meeting with a federal civil rights investigator from Atlanta. They presented the folder. The screenshots. The identity of CC Hawk was still a mystery, but the heat was on. Watts, under pressure and finally cooperating fully, submitted an affidavit naming Holcomb and 2 other officers who had pressured her into staying silent. Within 24 hours, the Department of Justice announced a formal probe into the Shady Oaks PD. It was the beginning of something major. News spread fast. Protests reignited. Kendra was now not just a face of injustice but a symbol of resistance. She appeared on national television. Gave interviews to CNN, NBC, The Root. Everywhere she went, she carried the folder. This is proof, she said, that silence is a weapon. That systems protect themselves before they protect people. Her voice was calm but fierce. She was no longer asking for justice. She was demanding it. But just as momentum surged, something cracked. 2 days before her civil trial was set to begin, Kendra's phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "You're in over your head. Ask your lawyer why she hasn't shown you everything." Attached was a photo. It was taken from across the street, zoomed in. It showed Carla Bright, sitting in a car, talking to someone, smiling. And the man she was talking to? Detective Holcomb. Kendra stared at the photo for what felt like hours. Her first instinct was denial. Carla had been her champion, smart, aggressive, outspoken. But then the photo timestamp hit her like ice. 11:47 a.m., the exact time Carla had told her she was prepping witness testimony at the courthouse. Kendra didn't tell Lila right away. She just watched, observed. Let Carla continue with her pretrial strategy meetings, listened as she coached her on what to say, how to frame the emotional distress, how to lean into the media attention. And then at the final prep meeting, Kendra asked a quiet question. "What do you think the city council will argue in response?" Carla paused just a second too long. Then replied, "They'll probably deny involvement. Say it was rogue cops acting without supervision." Kendra's blood went cold. Carla hadn't been shown the city council messages. She shouldn't have known about their connection. Unless she already did. Unless she'd been feeding them information. Unless this whole case was being steered from the inside. That night, Kendra returned home. Finally home for the first time since her release. She tucked her kids into bed, kissed them both, and walked out to the porch. The night was silent. Calm. Too calm. She opened her email and began typing a message. Subject, backup plan. She attached copies of the chat logs, screenshots of the messages, and even the photo of Carla and Holcomb. She sent it to 3 journalists, a DOJ agent, and a trusted blogger who had supported her since day one. She never finished her coffee. Because just before dawn, someone smashed her living room window. A brick landed on the couch. Wrapped in a note that said, "Next time it's not a warning." Police arrived hours later. Took the report. Promised extra patrols. But Kendra knew better. She watched the officer walk back to his cruiser, and saw his hand flash a signal to someone across the street. That night she didn't sleep. She made a decision. If the system was trying to silence her, she was going to burn it down. But what Kendra didn't know was that someone close to her had already been paid to stop her, and they were closer than she could ever imagine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The brick shattered more than a window. It shattered any illusion Kendra Allen still had that this would be a fair fight. This wasn't about evidence anymore. This was a war over silence, control, and public perception. Someone wanted her quiet, desperately. And judging from the way the officer subtly signaled to the figure across the street before pulling off, it was clear. The system wasn't just cracking. It was rotting from the inside. The folder of messages now lived in 5 encrypted backups. Her email dump had reached national outlets, and the DOJ had confirmed their investigation was now expanding to include municipal officials. But even as momentum seemed to swing her way, the sense of danger grew. She started noticing the same gray sedan idling across from her job. Her sister's mailbox was smashed open. Twice. Her children's school called, saying a man had tried to pick up Jalen, claiming to be a family friend. Kendra's hands shook as she drove to the school, her mind racing, not with fear but with fury. That night, she moved her children to a relative's house 2 towns over and didn't tell a soul where. Not even Carla. Because trust had become a luxury Kendra could no longer afford. The photo of Carla Bright talking to Detective Holcomb kept gnawing at her. Smiling. Laughing. It didn't add up. Carla had built her reputation on taking down dirty cops and corrupt systems. She'd won settlements, helped expose misconduct, even filed ethics complaints against judges. And yet here she was, possibly having private, unreported meetings with the very man Kendra was suing. And now, Carla was pushing harder than ever to settle. "You can walk away with $500,000, she said at their last meeting. "No more threats. No more press. You win either way." But Kendra didn't want to win. Not like that. Not quietly. She wanted them exposed. So she made a move of her own. She hired a digital forensics analyst, quietly, discreetly. Paid him with what little she had saved, using a burner phone registered under Lila's name. His job was simple: Trace the messages in the police folder, verify their origin, and if possible, identify the person behind the username CCHawk. It took him 4 days. And on the morning of the 5th, he sent a message that almost made Kendra drop her phone. CCHawk equals Councilman Eugene Hart. Eugene Hart. The very man who had publicly called Kendra's arrest regrettable but understandable. The same man who had once posed for a photo with her children at a school charity event. The face of progress in Shady Oaks. He wasn't just involved. He was orchestrating it. The messages traced back to his office IP. One of them even referenced the arrest date days before it happened, with a line that read, "Allen gets picked up Tuesday. That'll make the paper Wednesday. Start pressuring the grant board Thursday." The timeline fit. The motive was undeniable. He had used her as a pawn in a financial play to boost crime stats and win budget increases. She was nothing but a headline to him. A tool. And now he was trying to bury the truth before the press and the public caught on. But it was too late. Because the next morning, a full expose ran in the Atlantic Ledger, naming Councilman Eugene Hart as the alleged architect of a fraudulent identity theft sting operation designed to exploit the state's grant program. The article quoted anonymous law enforcement sources, described the messages in chilling detail, and included a redacted version of the optics control email chain. The backlash was immediate. Protesters flooded City Hall. City Council emergency meetings were called. Reporters camped outside Hart's gated home. His office issued a denial, of course, calling it a manufactured smear campaign by an opportunist with an internet following, but the damage was done. And then came the subpoena. Eugene Hart was ordered to testify before a grand jury. Kendra was finally starting to believe they were close. That justice was more than a theory. That maybe, just maybe, the people who orchestrated her trauma would actually answer for it. And then she got a phone call. From her sister. Sobbing. Broken. "Kendra, you need to come here. Now." The drive took 20 minutes, but it felt like 20 hours. When she arrived at the safe house, the door was open. Inside, the table was overturned, dishes shattered, drawers rifled through. The kids were gone. Lila sat in the corner, knees to chest, holding a phone with shaking hands. "They took them," she whispered. "They took them, Kendra." Kendra's brain short-circuited. "What do you mean they took them? Who?" "I don't know," Lila stammered. "2 men, suits, badges. Said they were from Child Protection. I thought you sent them. They said you signed an emergency removal order. They had paperwork." Kendra dropped to her knees. This couldn't be happening. Again. No call. No warning. No warrant. Just vanished, her children, ripped away under false authority. Again. She called every contact she had. Police. CPS. Lawyers. No one had any record of any action taken against her. There was no removal order. No visit. No officers dispatched. It wasn't real. It was a setup. And that's when she got another message. An encrypted email from an unknown address. "You were warned. You had your moment. Now sit down. Or your kids won't come back." She screamed. Lila cried harder. This wasn't just corruption anymore. This was abduction. Kendra contacted the DOJ directly. Told them everything. The threats. The brick. The CPS impersonation. The message. The agent on the line went silent. "We'll deploy a federal task force," he said finally. "This goes beyond our initial scope." But hours passed. No word. No sign of Maya or Jalen. Just silence. That night, Kendra sat alone in a hotel room. Her world unraveling. Her story hijacked. Her babies missing. And that's when the knock came. Soft. Measured. She peeked through the peephole. It was Carla. Holding a file. Face pale. Eyes unreadable. Kendra opened the door halfway. "If you're here to settle, turn around." But Carla shook her head. "I'm not." "What then?" Carla's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think I know who took your kids." Kendra stepped back. "Who?" Carla looked her dead in the eyes. Then held out the file. Kendra opened it. Inside was a list of wire transfers. Payments routed through shell accounts. Bank names she didn't recognize. Dollar amounts too precise to be accidental. At the bottom of the list, a name. A familiar name. One that made her vision blur and her knees nearly buckle. Lila Allen. Her sister. The one person she trusted more than anyone. The name was printed under the recipient line of 4 separate payments. $5,000. $8,500. $15,000. And the last one, just 2 days before the abduction. $25,000. Check the timestamps, Carla whispered. The first payment was made 3 days after your arrest went public. She's been feeding them since day one. Kendra dropped the file. Eyes wide. Heart splintering. Her voice barely came out. No. Carla nodded, grim. I'm sorry. But your sister sold you out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The room spun. The words didn't feel real. Lila? Kendra blinked at the paper on the floor like it might rearrange itself into a different name. But the transfers were there, black and white, stark and damning. 4 payments. 4 betrayals. Her sister, her blood, had taken money from the same system that destroyed her life. Carla stood silent, letting the moment settle like dust in a crypt. Kendra's throat clenched. No, she said quietly, no she wouldn't. But her mind was already going back, rewinding through every late-night talk, every plan they'd made, every time Lila had mysteriously missed a call, or forgotten to print a document, or had just stepped out when someone knocked. Lila had helped her gather evidence. She'd cried beside her. She'd played the part. But now it was clear, she hadn't been helping uncover the truth. She'd been helping delay it, distract it. And worst of all, she'd been the one who let the wolves in. Carla said, I traced the payments through 2 different shells, then backtracked the IP that triggered the fake CPS call. It pinged at a residence registered to a Janice Green, but the router name? Lila's nickname, Lily B. Kendra's breath left her body like a punch to the chest. Carla continued, she didn't just sell you out, Kendra. She orchestrated the abduction. She gave them the location of the safe house. They didn't find it. She led them there. Something inside Kendra snapped, not in rage, not even in sadness, but in clarity. She stood up. Calm. Focused. Where is she now? Carla shook her head. She turned off her phone 3 hours ago. Probably on the run. Kendra grabbed the file and her keys. Then let's find her. They didn't have to look far. Surveillance footage from a rural gas station 2 towns over showed Lila gassing up a gray SUV, one rented under a fake name, and Maya and Jalen visible in the back seat. The timestamp, 36 minutes prior. Kendra's hands shook as she replayed the footage over and over. Her babies were alive. Scared but alive. Carla called her DOJ contact, who immediately greenlit a region-wide BOLO, be on the lookout, and flagged the license plate. Meanwhile, Kendra used a detail only a mother would know to narrow the search. Maya's favorite snack, rainbow sherbet push pops. A weird brand sold at only 3 truck stops in the whole region. One of them was just 40 miles away. Kendra and Carla drove like lightning, calling every store ahead. And then, a clerk at Stop and Fuel near Baxter Creek confirmed, yeah, there was a lady with 2 kids. Girl asked for push pops. Woman seemed nervous. The clerk didn't know he was talking to the children's mother. He just remembered that the lady had turned southbound toward Pine Hollow National Park. A remote area. Limited service. No cameras. Kendra gripped the wheel harder. She's trying to vanish. As Carla called the FBI liaison, Kendra drove faster. They didn't talk. There was nothing to say. When they reached the park trailhead an hour later, the parking lot was mostly empty, except for the gray SUV, engine still warm. A ranger approached, startled by the urgency in Kendra's voice. She showed photos. Explained everything. The ranger radioed ahead. We've got 2 kids and a woman heading up Pine Ridge Trail. About 40 minutes ago. Kendra didn't wait. She ran. The hike was steep, dusty and scattered with sharp roots, but she didn't stop. Not for air, not for water, not even when her lungs felt like they might explode. Carla and 2 rangers followed. And then, halfway up the trail, they heard it. Crying. A child's cry. Eyes sharp. Maya. Kendra pushed harder, rounding the bend, and there they were. Jalen sitting on a rock. Maya clutching her knees, sobbing. And Lila standing just a few feet away, hands shaking, tear-streaked face staring into the woods like she was still deciding whether to run. Kendra stopped 10 paces away. Lila turned. Their eyes locked. I didn't want to, Lila said hoarsely. I swear I didn't want to do it. But they came to me. They offered me money. They said if I helped keep you quiet, the kids would be safe. That you'd get a payout. That you wouldn't suffer. Kendra's voice came low. I already suffered, Lila. Lila took a step forward. You don't understand. After Mom died, I had nothing. You were always the strong one. The one everyone looked at. I was just the sister. I needed to matter. And they promised I would. You mattered to me, Kendra said, voice cracking. Maya ran into her arms. Jalen followed. The two sisters stood there, one broken, one burning, and the silence between them said what words couldn't. Forgiveness wasn't in the air. Not that day. Behind them the Rangers moved in. Lila didn't resist. She looked down. She was crying again, but the tears didn't matter anymore. The trial came 2 months later. Councilman Eugene Hart was indicted on conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. He resigned in disgrace. Detective Holcomb was charged with tampering evidence, false arrest, and abuse of power. 2 more officers were suspended. The state revoked Shady Oaks grant funding. A new interim police chief took over with a mandate for transparency. Lila Allen received 5 years for conspiracy, aiding and abetting abduction and obstruction. She pled guilty. No trial. No appeal. Just shame. Kendra's civil suit won in court. $3.5 million in damages. But she never cashed the check. Instead, she formed the Maya and Jalen Justice Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to exposing wrongful arrests, especially those targeting Black women and mothers. Her story was made into a documentary. She testified before Congress. She helped get a national bill introduced requiring real-time facial recognition review and minimum evidence standards before issuing arrest warrants for identity theft cases. And in 2026, she was awarded the Freedom Flame Award by the National Civil Rights Commission. Not for surviving, but for fighting back. On stage that night, she held her children's hands and said, I lost everything. But I also found everything. I found what happens when one lie meets one system built to multiply it, and one woman decides to tell the truth anyway. And the crowd stood. Not because she was a hero, but because she refused to be a victim. The truth is often buried, not by monsters but by people in suits, badges, and even family ties. It takes courage to confront injustice, but it takes relentless conviction to expose it when everyone around you is pretending not to see it. Kendra's story reminds us that injustice doesn't begin with violence. It begins with silence. And the only way to break that cycle is to refuse to be quiet. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths.